So, when I was a kid, as some of you guys may or may not know, I lived in a very fucked up house. Hauntings out the ass. We had the shadow men on the walls that you would just see in the middle of the day, like the dark masses that was attached to nothing. We had animals that seemed to always die whenever my mother was watching them, although she never did anything wrong to them in particular. We had the sounds. We had strange liquids coming down walls. We had everything that you can possibly imagine and things that I'm even too terrified to speak of. Well, we try to distract ourselves a lot as much as possible and have reasons to not be in the house at all hours of the day. And one of our favorite pastimes, and this became a pastime of everyone in the neighborhood, was spotlight tag. Every weekend. I'm talking every Friday and Saturday night. Sometimes on Sundays or weekdays if it was someone's birthday or special occasion, or we didn't have school the next day, as long as all the parents agreed. So we'd always start out at one end of the block and have our kind of base. Everyone would know, if you decide you don't want to play anymore and you want to be safe, you just have to sneak to base and then, you're safe, you're good, you're out of the game. But at least no one caught you. But if you were hardcore about it, you waited, you found your perfect spot, and you hid there for all of eternity to be blessed with that familiar phrase, last man standing. Because if you survived the night and no one found you, that was like an honor that very few kids ever received. And you were kind of a god in the neighborhood amongst the kids. Like you were the best at hiding, but to us, it meant something more legendary than that. Some special skill that no other kid had quite figured out. And at this point in time, no kid had survived that long. Someone had always found them. It was sort of a matter of either A, parents would call the game, or something weird would happen and the kid would give themselves away by coughing too loud at the last second or whatever. Tonight was going to be my night. I felt it. I had never been able to pull it. I was the closest so far. I found some great spots. But the shitty thing about finding a great spot when you're hiding is the second you're found, at least one other person knows it exists. And whether they take that spot in the future or it's the first one they check every time they're it. That's just sort of how these things go. It's our mentality when we're playing hide and seek. But the cool thing about Spotlight Tag was that it was hide and seek outside at night. And the only way the seeker could find you is if they shine the light on you. Now, as you can imagine, there's a lot of debate amongst kids like, oh, the light didn't hit me. You didn't point the light on me when you found me, so you didn't find me. And there's the stupid arguments like that we all had because we just wanted to be the best and we looked for any excuse that we could find just to kind of slide under the radar. So I decided that I was going to hide in the playhouse. And before you say that's a stupid spot, why aren't they going to check there? Let me explain. Our backyard and our house was kind of weird, and you could hide it in at any house on the block. You couldn't go in an actual house, and there were some parents that would say, "Okay, you can't go in my garage or my carport." Like we all knew what was off limits in the block. Leaving the block was also off limits. So we did have rules and boundaries, and we had parents scattered around on the outskirts of boundaries to keep us honest and for safety. Well, my backyard of that creepy ass house, no one ever wanted to hide in my yard. And I knew it. I didn't want to hide in my own fucking yard if I'm being completely honest with you. Who would? I wanted to get away from my home. But I knew that if I hid in this yard, it would take them forever to come look, and then the chances of them like really wanting to explore it were pretty slim. The only cool thing about our house in our yard that was awesome was that playhouse. And it was probably 5 summers before that my dad, my grandfather, and my best friend slash brother's father at the time, um, built this thing for us. And these were people that were all very handy. So what you had was a house. It looked like what a tiny houses look like these days, but up on stilts, like 10 feet in the air. It had the staircase that went like this. It had a front porch with railing. It had everything, even a porch light. This thing looked legit and it looked nice. And we had, all kinds of stuff in there from different ages. Like we had our fake kitchen sets with our fake food so we could play house, stupid, silly things. We had a dartboard with the rubber tips would just kind of sink in place. We had all kinds of cool little things up there and drawing walls, books galore, honestly. And what I figured out was there was this one corner, right? If I moved the fake kitchen sink and one of the fake bookshelves and brought them closer together in the corner, but brought them out a little bit, you couldn't tell actually because the spacing and the way it was made that they weren't flush in the corner, but it left a spot big enough for me to hide behind. And I'd secretly practice this through the week. although my brother and sister played this game with us too, I made sure to sneak out, like during the day when they were at school because I was kind of young. So my school schedule was not as stringent as theirs. And I made sure it worked. And sure enough, I couldn't see anywhere where I could be found. Well, let me also preface this by pointing out what had been going on in the neighborhood at this time. There were a lot of disappearances. It started off pretty simple as first. You're like, hey, my dog's missing, my cat's missing. You see the missing animal signs up at the public library and the grocery store, local telephone poles, things like that. I should also say that this was the 80s, by the way, late 80s. Um, so this was kind of an issue. And then it progressed into a kid from our neighborhood. Timmy went missing, and he was a pretty good friend of all of ours. And at that point in time, they'd still never found them. So the general rule is, small town, pay attention to where you are, go out in groups, don't be alone, etc., etc., etc. The normal shit. Well, we didn't think none of this back then. It was just what was happening in the neighborhood. Nothing like this had ever happened before. Our parents just basically bullshit us and just told us, well, I'm sure they'll find him or et cetera, et cetera. It's nothing to worry about. You guys, be kids, play, have fun. Don't worry about it. That's the adult stuff. So we were taking them true to the word and believing our parents, which, back then you probably should not have done in that time period. um, and we were having a good time. So I got my spot early. I moved that fake kitchen. I moved that fake bookshelf. I even grabbed a book from it just because I had enough light where I could kind of see. And that was the cool thing about my spot. There was this cool mirror that at the time it did not dawn on me that if you looked right in the mirror, you could probably just see me where I was. But I didn't think about that. I thought that I was using that mirror at an angle to see where they were. So I was the smart one, not the stupid one. It wasn't until 6 months after this, by the way, that I figured out that I was really stupid about that fucking mirror. So I'm in my spot. I can hear sounds from the neighborhood. I mean, this thing, it had it's so weird to talk about this thing because it had an actual functional window with shutters. It had actual drywall. It had insulation, but yet you could still, hear decently what was going on outside. Enough. And I was quiet. Every once in a while you'd hear, "Oh, you found me." No, you didn't. No, you didn't. I didn't see that flashlight beam. The usual arguments. You'd have the one kid that was always so sure he was gonna make it to the end and cries every time you find him. We had him freaking out. I guess he had hid also in my yard, but didn't know I was there and hid underneath the cover to the crappy ass little 3-foot pole we had in the backyard. And they found him pretty quick. And another cool thing about the seeker is you can choose to let people come with you. They just have to be quiet. They can't help you find people, but if you don't want to find people alone, again, the buddy system. So at this point in time, there was like 5 people in total with the seeker, and they're just wandering around, and they're like, "Hey, have you seen anybody else?" And you can hear that side conversation like, "Oh, yeah, I just saw Joe run underneath the car. And, that old lady down the street, Miss Etherton, yeah, he's right underneath her Cadillac. Go find him." And they scurried off. Because kids, even though they're not supposed to help, we're going to help. Especially if you're my best friend and I want to be better than you, I'm going to tell them where you're fucking hiding. Let's be honest. It's no hold bars and spotlight tag. A little while later, I heard him come back. I hear my sister's voice. The group's bigger. There's like 10 kids now. And there's like 30 some kids that play this game. Okay. Like there's a lot of kids, but I'm hearing like 10 kids' voices. And I hear, yeah, I don't know what it was, but I just saw it go into the backyard, like right behind us. And the way they're talking about it, there's fear in their voice. There's something going on, but I can't quite hear well enough to find out. But it seems like maybe they're not playing the game anymore. But I'd experienced this trick once before. I was caught just 3 weeks ago by them pretending that the game was over when it wasn't. And what did I do like an idiot? I popped out of my spot and they caught me. So I was not going to fall for that shit this time. This was not going to happen twice in 1 month. 1 month. Fuck that. So I stayed still. They get a little closer. Now they're towards the bottom, like of the playhouse, like the bottom steps. And they're talking like, yeah, I wouldn't go up there. Yeah, you can see right in. Yeah, see, look. And I noticed that a light was being shined into it, like from the ground, like up. So they felt like they didn't need to climb the stairs to look because I guess they didn't want to anyway. So they go off around the back behind Dad's garage, go off like to the other side of it, and that's when I hear something coming up the stairs. Like it's just it sounds like an adult like thump, like foot thump, like it's loud on the stairs. but apparently not so loud that anyone else but me heard it. And then, there was the creak of the door. It opened. It was a well-oiled door, but it still had its old, shitty wooden creaks. Man, fuck, the door opened. It was a trick. This was a trap. It was a good thing that I didn't come out because somehow they knew I was hiding up there and this was all their plan. And then I fucking saw it and the reflection in the mirror. This thing was easily 7, 8 feet tall. It had to duck its head. Now, my dad was 6'3", and he was the tallest one amongst the build team on this thing, and he had plenty of clearance above his head. This thing ducked. It held its head like this, like off to the side where its ear was almost touching its shoulder, and it was shrinking down. It was skinny as fuck. Like nothing alive could be this skinny. Like jokingly, people say, if you turn sideways, no one would know you were there. It's the thing we say to skinny people for some reason that I don't understand. It wasn't quite that skinny, but damn, if anything existed that was, it was this thing. And I say thing because it wasn't even wearing clothes. It had this mottled gray skin that looked like really bad, shitty fake leather that was just kind of draped over someone. Kind of like when you do paper mache and you're laying the pasty newspaper and you're trying to make something but it hasn't dried yet, so it kind of runs everywhere. That's kinda what its skin just looked like, and as it moved, that skin just shook a little to even seem more like it wasn't really properly attached to the root to the actual flesh in any way, and there was this smell, man, fuck, I'll never forget this smell as long as I live. It didn't just smell like rot, like that sweet rotten smell, it smelled like a lot of different things all at once, and that rot smell was just kind of under it all. So you smelled the earth. That general, like earthy, flowery kind of smell or I don't know, something just lets you know that you're outside, like the outside smell, like cut grass and flowers in the woods. But you also have that like smoky, almost like bonfire sort of smell, like where it's not burnt, but like the smell of the wood just kind of letting the aromas out. But the weirdest smell, man, was fucking jelly beans. Like I'm talking like old school jelly beans, because let's be honest, it doesn't matter what fucking colored jelly beans you got in the day. They pretty much all just about tasted the same. They could be yellow or red, but man, that was not lemon and cherry. That was one fucking flavor with different colors, just like Fruit Loops. And I don't care who tells me different because you're wrong. They all taste the fucking same. But it was that smell. And it was a smell that I was familiar with, man, because that's what Timmy always fucking smelled like. This kid always had jelly beans and Fruit Loops and just weird shit, just candy. Even those little candy buttons that's on that weird wax paper that you have to peel off the little button and pop in your mouth and eat like at the old school candy shops. Those two also, no matter what the color is, they taste the same. This was like his thing. And they all have this weird smell to this day. Go buy any of those things and smell them. They smell what I would consider is vaguely fruity. You don't know what kind of fruit that fucking is, but it smells like what we're pre-programmed to think a fruit would smell like. Aromatic and, well, fuck, fruity. I can't explain it any more than aromatic and fruity. That was weird, man. Why do I what is and I just stopped. It looked right in the mirror, but again, my brain had not yet realized that looking in the mirror meant it was looking at me. I just thought it happened to be looking at the wall, and I was lucky enough to see it without seeing me. And its face got real close to the mirror, and I noticed its eyes. Right in the very center part of the eye, there was something shiny there, and there wasn't hardly any light. There was barely enough light at all. The only light that was there was from the moon, and it wasn't even a full moon. We're talking like at best a quarter moon, man. At best a quarter moon, like waning even. So the light wasn't strong, but because we were up higher and there was no tree cover, that little bit of light just came in the window the right way for me to see it, and it was shiny, ungodly, weirdly shiny. Like if you took a picture of something, you see the red eye, except for in real life, like that kind of a weird reflection on the iris. And that's I'd only ever heard of a couple things like that before. There's a lot of names for things like that. Some people call them mimics. Some people call them skinwalkers. There's a lot of different names for what this is. But of course, it's not a skinwalker because it's not in Arizona. It's not a lot of things because of the area that we're in. But a mimic, well, that's possible. Fleshgate, even, it's likely. And then it talked. It actually said some words. And this is the fucked up part because when it spoke like someone that didn't understand the human language, not just a dialect, not just, a language, but any human language. It's like when you're mimicking something, but you don't understand how a word is said. Like I might say, here's a banana. What you would hear from this thing is, here's a banana. So it's truncated. It's weird. The vowels are wrong. The way the word is said and pronounced is so wrong. You cannot imagine any human being would ever say these words like this. And that's what it all sounded like. And it said, I smell you. I smell you. Here. And it slapped its hand against the bookcase. And then I heard sounds outside. I heard my sister. I actually heard my brother. I heard my mom. I heard other parents in the neighborhood. All these voices. And I'm thinking, shit, this is it. I'm saved. Like, I don't know what's going on. I don't know what the fuck this thing is. I have no idea what's going on. Why can I still smell Timmy? They're here. Everything's fine. And as their voice is getting louder, this thing is hunting like more voraciously. I don't know if it just didn't understand, like I didn't understand the mirror situation, but it's now on the other side of the room. It rips the blackboard that we had, like screwed into the wall, off the wall, just rips it from one corner. And this thing was sunk deep into studs with screws. It just rips one whole side off and just dingles it and just grunts. Gets into the other little shelves we have where we've got all the fake food and the fake pots and pans and some other weird shit and just yanks it away to the bare wall behind it. The voices are now no longer getting louder. They're getting softer, which means that safety, that security, that salvation that I thought I had just a moment ago, their voices getting louder and surely they would find me. They didn't. And they didn't hear that anything was going on up there. And I don't know how, because they had to have at least gotten to the pool. And that's 50 feet, maybe a little less from this place, but they did not hear it. And the next thing I know, there's lights, bright lights, multiple sources, all shining in at once. And it happened just as the moment that fake kitchen set got ripped away from me. And it got down like right at face level and just eyed me. And I saw what was in those eyes beyond the shininess. There was nothing. There was nothing inside those eyes. Whatever this thing was, it was soulless. It was a killer. It was there for food. It had no purpose. It was hungry. And it told me so. Right in my face, as the spit dripped and the drool just dangled from its mouth, it said, hungry, hungry, hungry. And then the door slammed open. A shot rang out. And I noticed my dad was standing right there on the porch with a shotgun. This thing took one hit, forced its way past my dad, which again was a giant dude, 6'3", but like wide as fuck, like huge dude. Like you would be terrified of my dad if you didn't know him. He was a big, scary guy. And it just parted him like he was a fucking piece of paper. Ran, broke through the railing, and took the fuck off. But it left something behind. It left one of Timmy's shoes on the ground when it hit before it took off. And that's when I realized they did know that that was salvation. They had gone to get my dad and the shotgun because they were all kids, parents, and all terrified at the bottom of those stairs when my dad picked me up and carried me out and down. That thing was never reported in our neighborhood again or anywhere. There was no missing anything or anyone, not so much as a missing thing from your front yard after that, up until we moved. But people still talk about it. People still talk about that. And it's hard for me because I think I might have been the only one that saw it, at least the only one, other than Timmy. So they don't always believe what I've got to say. They think, oh, you were a kid then. Whatever it was that you saw, that you experienced, you made it up in your head because it was such a weird, traumatic experience, except for my dad fucking saw it. And my dad did not believe in anything. Up until he admitted finally the house was haunted years later and we moved, he didn't believe in anything. And even if it was real, it didn't exist. But even he pretended that it didn't exist. He didn't back me up either. he would just blow me off when I try and talk to him about it and pretend that it was in my head because he didn't want to face it either. So I guess if he thought that he discredited me even as a kid, even as an adult before he passed, then no one would ever believe it, and he would never have to come to the harsh reality about how true it was. So I've been on an island all these years just with this experience rattling around in my head, not being able to tell anyone about it or talk about it because no one will ever believe that something this insane and this intense happened to anyone, let alone a child. But if I can give you any piece of advice, it's this. If anyone in your life comes to you and they tells you a story like this with tears in their eyes, visibly shaking, and it connects to you in some way, believe them. Just think for a moment. What if there are things out there that we don't have explanations for? Things, creatures that are such a part of nature, they've probably existed for as long or longer than mankind. They're no different than deer or moose if you're in Canada. They're just animals, and they're a part of our everyday life that no one talks about for one reason or another.